Most people live as if they are in an audition. They enter life with pleading eyes. Please choose me, see me, make me feel worthy. They don't realize that every time they bow their heads, they are handing a sword to someone else, giving others the power to appraise them, label them, and discard them like a trend that's gone out of style. Carl Jung called this the betrayal of the self, when we live as a shadow of ourselves, chasing a reflected image from others, forgetting that real worth doesn't need validation, it simply is. You are not a product waiting for a discount in the emotional marketplace. You were not born to be someone's convenient option when they happen to have free time. You are unrepeatable, and you are meant to walk into a room as if your very presence was already the selection. But the modern world doesn't teach you that. It teaches you to please. It teaches you to be agreeable, cute, available, forgettable. It teaches you that if you give more, text first more, accommodate more, eventually you'll be allowed to stay. But you're still abandoned. Not because you're not beautiful enough, not because you're not smart enough, but because you sold yourself out through your own fear of not being loved. True value doesn't scream. It doesn't perform. It doesn't chase. It stands still. The world, if it has eyes sharp enough, will stop and bow. Key 1. Stop offering the discount version of yourself. You cannot expect others to see you as rare if every time you enter someone's life, you bargain with yourself. Every time you send a third text with no reply, every time you force a smile to avoid conflict, every time you say it's okay while breaking inside, you are unconsciously signaling, I am not a gift, I am a deal. Carl Jung called this a fragmentation of the self when people begin to perform instead of live. You become a persona, a likable mask, manageable, easily forgotten. But luxury doesn't behave like that. Luxury isn't something anyone can just touch. Luxury doesn't reply to 3 a.m. texts from those who don't deserve it. Luxury doesn't kneel to be appraised. You've forgotten that silence is also a form of power. Not power to manipulate, but power to be selective. People don't leave you because you're too strong. They leave because you're too negotiable, because you gave them everything before they even proved they were worthy of anything. Remember this. He who does not name his own price will be sold at someone else's. And the modern world is a brutal marketplace where value drops with every step you take toward becoming a copy. You don't need to do more to be loved. You need to do less to see who stays when you stop flattering. Stop pleasing. Stop straining to be worthy. That's when you begin to pull your energy back from those who take it for granted. That's when you stop asking to be seen and begin to show up as if you are the light. And it is precisely when you stop chasing, when you withdraw your discount version of yourself, that you become something people cannot easily reach, and for that very reason, they begin to crave it. Key 2. Don't beg to be seen. Walk in like you are the center. A person who doesn't know their worth will always try to stand out. They talk too much, prove too much, rush to impress, and in that rush they unknowingly remove themselves from the position of uniqueness. Carl Jung once said, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And the greatest darkness you must face is the fear of being forgotten. It's that fear that makes you do more than necessary to be noticed. But you don't realize anything that strains for attention will always carry the scent of lack. Look at those who are truly respected. They walk into a room and say nothing. But the room changes, not because they try to prove something, but because their energy is already a declaration. Luxury doesn't knock. Luxury opens doors through uncompromising presence. You want to be seen, then stop begging to be seen. Stop scanning for eyes like you're on stage. Stop engaging just enough to prove you deserve to stay. You are the center not because you claimed the spot, but because you don't need a spot to be yourself. The immature self wants to be liked by everyone. The mature self wants to live in truth even if misunderstood. Real magnetism doesn't come from volume. It comes from steadiness in silence, from the way you stand without retreat, from your gaze without persuasion, from your voice without flattery. When you stop making yourself the backdrop for others' comfort, you become the person others must reorient themselves to approach. That is the difference between someone hoping to be chosen and someone whose presence makes others grow serious. Key 3. Accessibility kills. Value. Not everyone leaves you because they don't need you. Many people leave simply because they can. Humans don't cherish what is always available. We are attracted to what is hard to grasp, what requires effort, what demands seriousness. Carl Jung once observed, "We do not truly possess what we did not pay a price for." And if you're always accessible, always replying immediately, always willing to fix things instead of setting boundaries, you're sending a message to others: I'm a land anyone can walk on. No permit required, I'm an open map, no courage needed to decipher me. Luxury does not respond instantly, it responds selectively. It doesn't refuse out of pride, but because it knows what deserves its energy. Do you realize that people always crave what lies just out of reach? Rarity is born from limits, not frequency. You don't need to play hard to get. You just need to become someone who is not controlled by the desire to be chosen. Those who live to be validated will always open the door too soon. But those who understand value won't let just anyone step in, not even their own emotions. Jung called this the maturity of a self that knows how to protect itself. Not a fortress, but a gate with guards. People test you by seeing if you sway easily, if you forgive unconditionally, if you can be summoned by a late-night message. Every time you say yes out of fear of losing someone, you lose your scarcity, the very thing that creates value. Like wine, watches, or art, the easier something is to get, the easier it is to forget. You want to be seen as luxury, then stop showing up as the default option. Make people have to rise above their superficiality before they are allowed to touch your depth. Key 4. Emotional self-mastery. Silence is power. Some people lose their value not because they're not intelligent, but because everyone knows exactly how to trigger them. A rejection sends them into panic. A message left on read sends them spiraling. A cold glance and they lose all inner stability. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Emotions, when unseen, become tools for others to control you. And if anyone can push your buttons through your insecurities, you are no longer luxury, you are just an emotional switch that anyone can press. Luxury doesn't get angry quickly. Luxury doesn't beg for clarity. Luxury doesn't scream to be heard. It is calm, so calm that it forces others to change their tone. Silence, when it comes from strength, is the most powerful form of response. Because others can't predict how you will react. They begin to be cautious in how they treat you. You don't need to shout to earn respect. You need centeredness. That's what makes you different. The calmer you are, the clearer others see that communication with you is a privilege, not an entitlement. Your silence reveals the noise inside them. And when people are forced to hear themselves, they begin to realize you are not someone to test boundaries with. Jung once called this the state of individuation, when a person is no longer swept away by external emotional reflexes, but begins to respond from an integrated consciousness. And when you reach this state, even when rejected, you don't fall apart. Even when insulted, you don't collapse. Because your value is not defined by how others treat you, but by how you respond to yourself. Luxury is not the absence of emotion. It is emotion mastered, not handed over to anyone else. Key 5. Timely rejection, honoring yourself through distance. There is a dangerous illusion that has ruined many people, that rejecting someone is unkind, that withdrawing is selfish, that saying no is hurting others. But Carl Jung would not agree. He once wrote, "The integrity of the soul can only be achieved when we accept that we cannot please everyone." Rejection is not a cold act. It is a declaration, "I know my limits." When you always keep the door open, always give one more chance. Always forgive unconditionally. Always wait, even when being disregarded, you are not as noble as you think. You are simply begging for a place in someone else's life. Luxury does not beg. Luxury stands there, radiant and quiet, and lets the world adjust its energy to be worthy of it. Rejection is the only true test of who is serious. Anyone who withdraws when you stop being easy was never truly interested in you. They wanted the accessible version of you, not your real self. When you don't know how to say no, you turn yourself into someone cheap, willing to endure, willing to compromise because you fear losing others more than losing yourself. Distance, if you are strong enough to create it, will reveal who wants you for you and who just wants you to fill their own emptiness. And the scariest part is, the easier you are to forgive, the more likely you are to be tested again. Because people don't learn from what you say. They learn from the boundaries you are willing to set and uphold. You don't need to explain why you are walking away. You just need to walk. Because when you withdraw your energy from a place where there is no respect, you begin to resurrect yourself. Jung once warned, no one will save you if you keep handing your soul to those who don't know how to value it. The right kind of distance doesn't create emptiness, it creates clarity. And that clarity is what makes you rare and irreplaceable. Key 6. Loneliness as a sacred ritual. Facing the true self. There is a quiet fear that lives inside many people. The fear of being alone. Not because they hate silence, but because in that silence, they are forced to hear their true voice. Carl Jung called this state the recollection of the unintegrated self the moment you look into the mirror, and there is no one beside you to validate who you are. And if you cannot bear solitude, you will forever choose the wrong connections just to escape yourself. But the truth is, luxury does not need to be everywhere to feel real. Luxury knows its value even in an empty room. You must learn to walk alone, not out of pride, but because clarity requires space. When you stop fearing silence, you begin to clearly see who calls you out of sincerity and who calls you just to fill their void. The loneliness you fear is the sacred space where you recreate yourself. No applause, no watching eyes, just you and the raw truth. There, you will see that some of the pain you carry did not come from anyone else, but from repeatedly betraying yourself. Some of the choices you've called love were actually fear in disguise. And sometimes, your staying was trampling on the very self that was trying to rise. You cannot become a symbol if you are not brave enough to dwell in your own temple. Jung once said, "The one who has never gone into the darkness of their soul will never be able to illuminate others." And luxury doesn't come from appearance. Luxury comes from the inner peace you earn when you learn to live with yourself without fear. That is why you cannot be replaced. Not because you're better, but because very few are willing to walk through the fire of solitude to find themselves. And when you do that, your presence becomes sacred, not because you need others, but because you don't need anyone to be yourself. Key 7. Become someone who cannot be labeled. They will try to call you by every name. Cold, unpredictable, arrogant, emotionless, hard to love. But don't react. Because they're not truly defining you, they're just trying to shrink you into something easier to understand. Carl Jung once warned that society cannot tolerate the individuated, those who have broken free from the collective's influence and live in alignment with their complete, authentic selves. Such people cannot be categorized, and therefore cannot be controlled. Luxury is a paradox. Everyone sees it, but no one owns it unless they are worthy. You don't need to play the role of the good person. You don't need to please the whole world. You are not an emotional menu for others to pick from according to their tastes. You are a solid, distinctive being with sharp edges, undiluted. When you're no longer predictable, you force people to look more closely. When you no longer fit into familiar roles, you make them take you seriously. When you stop nodding out of habit, you require them to show up as their real selves, not their masks. And that's when your value is defined by depth, not by labels. You don't need them to understand you in 5 minutes. You just need the courage not to compromise for those who only accept the edited version of you. They will say you're hard to approach. But in truth, you simply don't open the door for those who don't know how to knock properly. They will say you don't know how to love. But in truth, you've stopped calling attachment love. Luxury does not need to be understood at first sight. Luxury requires someone patient enough to explore, refined enough to notice, and mature enough not to destroy. And you, if you dare to live without needing a description, if you dare to be yourself without anyone's approval, you will no longer be a choice. You will be a mirror, not reflecting what others want to see, but reflecting the truth they can no longer avoid. Conclusion: become an icon. Luxury doesn't need to be chosen. There is a simple but painful truth. Most people don't leave you because you're not good enough, but because you're no longer easy to have. And that is exactly what's supposed to happen. You're not here to be chosen. You're here to choose yourself so powerfully that your absence becomes a wake-up call. You once thought that if you were good enough, they would stay. But Carl Jung made it clear, you are not loved for trying to become someone. You are loved when you are yourself. Unapologetically and unedited. Luxury does not go to auction. Luxury exists as a presence that others must elevate themselves to approach. Here is the rule. What is easy to get is not valued. What does not name its own worth will be priced by others. And those who don't know boundaries will be pushed infinitely. The world doesn't teach you that. It teaches you to be cute, easy to reach, and easy to adapt. And in that process, you abandon yourself just to be temporarily liked. But then, what you're forgotten. You're replaced. You're seen as the backup plan, not because you lacked anything, but because you never made anyone take you seriously. Luxury never stays where it's treated as a given. Luxury withdraws without a sound, but leaves aftershocks behind. When you stop begging to be chosen, when you stop negotiating your internal worth, when you become silent in your strength, people begin to feel your absence more than the presence of the loud. And from that moment, you are no longer someone picked or abandoned. You become the standard. You don't need to shout, "I have value." You only need to quietly leave the table when you know you are not being served with respect. You don't need to be valuable to everyone. You only need to be rare enough that the right one recognizes you and wouldn't dare to take you lightly. Starting today, stop texting first. Stop explaining yourself. Stop trying to be seen. Instead, become so deep you cannot be imitated. So still that others feel too loud next to you. So whole that you need no one to feel complete. And when you walk away, leave behind an awakening in the place where you were once taken for granted. Not everyone is meant to enter the temple, and not everyone deserves to remain in your light. Luxury doesn't chase. Luxury doesn't need to be chosen. Luxury simply exists, and the world will sort itself accordingly.